welcome everyone to today's webinar. Building a good customer experience does not happen by accident, it happens by design. And I know we've got two brilliant speakers today who are both very passionate about customer experience. Jerry Brown, the customer lifeguard. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, Rachel.
And I know that you're so passionate, you've actually written a book on customer experience. Do you want to tell the readers or the audience a bit about it?
Sure. Well, I've been, as I can't hide the webcam image that you're all getting. So as you can see, I've been doing this for a while, and I decided that I needed to share some of this information. I do write and speak quite a bit and blog quite a lot, so I did my best to combine a lot of the information that I've already got and tried to put it into some kind of readable version that I'm sharing with people. The book is called When a Customer Wins, Nobody Loses. And the title sort of suggests some of it, but it's really about how I think it's important to make sure that when you're interacting with customers that both sides win. That sounds obvious, but it rarely happens. So it's really designed to give some people maybe a bit of a historical tour around some of the things that have happened with customer experience over the years. And some of my ideas, again, we'll explore them very briefly today, but some of my ideas as to how organizations can do that. And I've tried to lay it out in a pretty simple way. I think I read lots of books on lots of things, and quite often I find that by the time I get to the second chapter, and there are lots of charts and quizzes and things like that, I've lost the will to live. So I just try to make it a little bit easier for people.
Brilliant. Well, we'll let our readers know when your book comes out. Also delighted to be joined by Mike Murphy from Genesis. Delighted as always to have you on board. One of our regular speakers, I have to say, Mike.
Thank you, Rachel. Good to be back, and I'm looking forward to this webinar. Nice to be working with Jerry, and I love his work, and yeah, it's going to be exciting.
So we are taking a replay of today's webinar. It will be available later on this afternoon, normally about 2 hours after the webinar is finished. So you can find it here on callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. So join us today for our discussion in the chat room. It's callcenterhelper.com/chat. You just need to put your first name, last name, and email address in. I mean, it's a great opportunity to chat with the rest of the audience and to kind of share your tips and everything. But you can also download the webinar slides. There's a lot of information being shared. As you can see, two very passionate speakers. Yeah, log into the chat room to download them. And as I mentioned, there's the added bonus of we do run a champagne or box of chocolates for the best tip. I've got the champagne here. Sadly, can't have chocolates in the office. They disappear too easily. So use hashtag question for a question and hashtag tip for a tip. And we'll come along to them later. So we've been asking, what is the biggest pain point for your customers in your customer journeys? So we've got a few answers. Samantha said managing peaks and lows. Mike has said queue times. Chloe has said biggest pain point is lack of sufficient information, which results in high volumes of call transfers, repeat calls, and subsequently unsatisfied callers. Which I think is a big thing, Mike. Obviously all the channels communicating kind of what is marketing sending out, and do you have the sufficient information on there?
Absolutely, but even just the notion of transfers, I mean, the fact that you have to transfer means something is wrong, and we really got to help the customer to understand why those customers are transferring and try and eliminate the need to transfer, because it's a burden on you as a sort of a contact center operator. It's a burden on your people because they have to go through a conversation about explaining why we have to transfer, and it's a burden on your customer. So really the best solution there really is to try and eliminate those transfers. And there's technology there to help do that. It's not a new thing, and it works very effectively when it's done properly. But yeah, a very common sort of a complaint in customer journey.
So we're launching our first poll, which is, what things have you tried to improve the customer experience? So let me just launch it now. So The answers are fixing broken processes, shortening queue times, agent engagement, changing metrics, adding additional channels. And it's multiple choice, so you can answer as many as you'd like. Jerry, what sort of things do you think people are going to say?
Well, I think fixing broken processes is pretty high on the agenda, and it will be some things I'll certainly relate to, because these are things that organizationally you can fix. I won't say you can fix them easily, but they are things that you can, if you get the teams together and talking about things. It's one of the places I start with a lot of businesses, just really asking them, what would they change? And more often than not, these are the kind of things that come out. And when you fix that, many of those other things start to work. So
Correct.
As Mike said, if you don't have transfers, if you've got processes in place that allow people to get to the right place first time, queue times will be shortened. You'll get much better agent engagement. The metrics will look far better. And adding additional channels is perhaps part of that. So where you can then provide people with other places to go, so that if they have to do something that procedurally is a little harder, and if they can do that better online, then they can do it online.
Right, I think you can see my screen actually, because yes, 85% of people say fixing broken processes, 51% say shortening queue times, 53% say agent engagement, 19% say changing metrics, and 41% saying adding additional channels. So we had 120 people vote on that poll. Mike, do you think that was something that you'd expect to see?
Yeah, I think it was pretty fair, actually. I think, sadly, I think there was a feeling that if we just rush to a different channel, we can kind of solve the problem. And really, I think all you're doing is kind of moving the problem. You really got to get back to understanding why the customers are contacting in the first place. And, for goodness sake, if you're having to do transfers, then you've got to really change how you're operating. That's a broken process, in my view, straight away. Yeah, nice to kind of see that, and yeah, my fear, if you like, was that the adding channel was going to be the answer, but clearly it isn't, which is good to see. That's good to see.
Great. So now, delighted to get into our agenda today and pass the baton over to Jerry to take him through his presentation. So I will share that with you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Brilliant.
And thanks once again for the opportunity to talk about these issues, because I think they are important. Good customer experience does not happen by accident. It happens by design. And I think that anyone that's heard me before or knows me recognizes that I'm a fairly optimistic person. I'm a glass half full person most of the time. But I think it's obvious to me, and I think for many of us, that all is not well in Customerville. And that's based on anecdotal and statistical evidence on both sides, meaning customer and practitioner. I see it on both sides of where I sit. And just to give you some examples, here's some headlines. So these are headlines that I picked up fairly recently, and certainly from, I think, just one weekend's paper. And I want you to look at some of the words that we see in here. So in this top one, consumers deceived. Then we move down to Epsom fools customers, travel firms dupe buyers. So are these the actions of people that really care about their customers? Of course they're not. Now, I won't go as far to say that they're intentionally thinking of criminal activity in the boardroom, but when you look at these things, you have to think that there's something really wrong here. And then when you, on the left side, you see my 7 million train journeys. As we know, the train companies are almost irretrievably broken in this country. And there was a survey came out in my most recent Which magazine about that. And this specifically talks to the fact that the way that they have been calculating delays is fundamentally flawed. They've been cooking the books here. And so the delays are much worse, and it says here half-hour delays, than they're actually talking about. And on the right side, Camilla Cavendish talking on a slightly different topic, but I think it all relates back. The fact that what's going on with executive pay. There's been a lot of concern about that. And she talks about the fact that, people making large sums of money, but then not delivering the goods, so to speak. And I think we've got quite a few examples of that. And I think when we look at where some of this comes from, here's a really interesting article that Jill Inslee, who is the consumer champion for the Sunday Times, she wrote an article at the end of the year in which she talked about the fact that she was able to get £500,000 of compensation for many of her readers who are having problems with companies. As you know, people write in and say, I've been trying to do this, and she calls them and gets them some money back. And what was interesting, I think, and the most interesting comment was, well, what she said she found were the issues. And thinking about what we heard about a few minutes ago about, what's broken, here's what she said, and I'll read it for those that are listening online. They have usually fallen victim to poor customer service, shoddy products, out-of-date computer systems, undertrained staff, badly written documentation, and poorly explained processes, what we just heard. So these are the things that she's finding in talking to customers, and I think these are the things that are really driving people crazy. And add to this is another part, this came out in January, talking about the great £725 ripoff. What this talked about was people that are loyal to their various companies. And it said here that which research found that a customer who's been with the same insurance, energy, and telecom provider for years could save £725 per year if they shopped around or haggled. As we know, most people don't want to shop around and haven't. That's why the situation exists, and certainly are not comfortable haggling. And I guess the reality is, why should you have to do either to get a good deal, especially if you're an existing customer? And I think this is the one that really nailed it for me. This was a letter in the last Sunday Times paper from an anonymous, experienced insurance actuary who'd worked for a number of different insurance companies. And he said, a customer in their 60s or 70s who's been with you for 15 years will pay up to 5 times what a new customer will be charged for the same risk. Now, is that any way to treat people? I don't think it is. So it's no surprise that customers are as mad as hell. And I found it interesting, this quote, I read this book recently, and it's not a particularly well-known author or well-known book, written 103 years ago. The world is disgracefully managed. One hardly knows to whom to complain. And I think what we're seeing is that people are really fed up with a lot of things. And I think what this points to is that customer experience, as I related earlier when we first started talking, customer experience is going through an existential crisis. And despite heavy investment by organizations to improve their customer experience, customers will still complain about inconsistent and unsatisfactory experiences, what Mike was sort of alluding to. And if we look at some more evidence, here's some other people, and you can see some of these things. And the last one talks about this is a quote from Inga Beale, who's the CEO of Lloyd's of London. I read this last night in the Standard. There's a distrust of big business. People don't know who to trust anymore. And this is a CEO that's saying this. So I think what you're seeing here is some fairly strong comments from people. Sean Smith's acronym speaks for itself. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on. So I think this is the backdrop. This is what I say is an across the board crash of CX quality. And it reminds us, and again, what I said earlier, that customers continually and much more frequently now reevaluate experiences and reassess loyalties. And I think when we look at what's actually going on, is that there's a polarization of trust. And this information comes from another survey that just came out this week. Edelman Global Trust Index is something that they do every year. They talk to people around the globe, and they talk to them about a whole range of things, but typically about government, about institutions and companies. And this is, if you like, this is NPS for government or business. And it says that it remains at distrusted level. So if this was NPS, this would be detractor level. That 20 of 28 countries are distrusters. People don't trust the country, let alone the companies. The US is at 43 points. The UK is at 39 points. Again, not particularly good numbers. I'm delighted, of course, to say that Canada tops the company index at 53%. And to quote Mandy Rice Davis, of course they would say that. And distrust in government is now the default. So we're basically saying we don't trust government. And again, we don't have to look too far to see that, do we? I think we all know what we're talking about. And this is the killer for me. 42% of respondents said they didn't know what brands to trust. So this is the backdrop that we're facing when we look at those things. And effectively what it is people are saying, we're not taking no, computer says no for an answer anymore, because we're seeing all of these things take place. And you're probably going to say, Jerry, well, yeah, we know all of this. So, so what? Well, the so what is that if you don't take notice of what people are saying in this vein, it's not just about long queues. It's not just about poor processes. It's about how the world is moving. And you really have to think about this. And the first thing I think you have to look at from a CX design perspective is that you must recognize and be informed by societal issues, changes, and attitudes. And by that, I mean that people aren't taking no for an answer anymore. People are complaining more. People are stepping up. And as an organization, you have to be listening to these people. I'm sure people will say, yes, well, we do voice of the customer. We're doing regular surveys. Well, I'm not sure that they're working, because clearly there are people that aren't happy with what's going on. Customer engagement doesn't happen in a vacuum. Customer experience, customer engagement is very much relevant and based on what's going on around you. So if you think, well, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the world, we'll just keep on proceeding as we should or have been, that won't work. Companies need to re-engage their moral compass and begin to rebuild trust. We've seen that. People do not trust as willingly as they used to, and that's changing. And I'm not suggesting all of you out there are doing this, but some of you, I think, do have to really think about how you're treating customers and how they're perceiving you. That perception word is very important. It's how you're perceived. The trust is only going to regain when truth moves back to the center stage. By that I mean, and we'll talk about this in a minute, organizationally, the things that you're doing to design your customer experience must be predicated on gaining customers' trust. So the things you say, how you say them, how you make them available. We talked about things like multiple channels, absolutely critical. And then lastly, companies must base their strategies on basic and fundamental principles that we all embrace. I think as individuals, we treat each other pretty well. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect world, but as individuals, we do. The minute we pull on our company regalia, it seems to change. We seem to have a whole different attitude, and that can't work. So we have to do what we do as individuals has to somehow transcend the business world. So what I see is that customer experience and societal change is a winning partnership for the future. In other words, basing our customer experience design on what works for us as individuals, is what works for us as human beings, is important. And so if you want a truly memorable, positive customer experience, it has to create value and be beneficial for all participants. That's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the title of my book. Everyone needs to feel like they win. Creating a culture where the customer wins and where customer experience are consistent and intentional is very much a team effort. And while lots of people stand up and say, yeah, we've got a cross-functional team that looks at customer experience, if you don't have that as an active, ongoing, really responsible and accountable team in your company, again, it will fail. Enabling and empowering your people. We hear a lot about people being empowered, but more often than not, they're really not. But empowering your people to make decisions that are fair, equitable, and ultimately acceptable and valuable to the customer is absolutely critical. Again, you will say, these are obvious. We've heard all this before. You may have heard it all before, but the headlines suggest that very few people are doing it. So this brings me to really the nub of it, the four key principles that I started looking at when I started looking at customer experience in more detail a few years ago. And really, it's the heart of what I write about. I looked at companies that were getting this right and doing it well. And I tried to make this fairly simple. And the reason they are single word principles is I felt that if you look at the culture, the communication, the commitment, and the community within your organization, it will take you a long way to designing a customer experience that you as an organization will be proud of and that your customers will abide by. If we start by looking at culture very briefly, here are two organizations that we know very well and are quite often cited by many people as great examples of customer experience. But these are two very different cultures that reflect opposite ends of what I call the customer's emotional spectrum. Disney creates experiences that are very personalized, and they're aimed at kids. They're aimed at kids from 8 to 80. I don't care how old you are, you go to Disneyland, if people that have been, it's a fabulous experience for everyone. Of course it's aimed at kids, but guess what? You go there, everything is done to make sure that you get the most out of that. So that's very much in your face in a positive way. And as a result, that personal connection, that emotional connection that you get when you leave a visit to Disney stays with you for a long time. If we look at Amazon, and notwithstanding some of the concerns that people had recently about their tax policies, the reality there is you never want to talk to Amazon if you can help it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. You just don't. If the stuff arrives and it's what you've ordered and it works, you're happy. I spoke to Amazon for the first time in about 15 years a little while ago. It was a really good experience, as it turned out, but I've never had to call them. So what I'm talking about here, this is two different cultures. I talked earlier about wowing and delighting or making it easy. These are very much two great examples. The culture that Disney has is we want to wow you. You want to walk out of there feeling fabulous. Amazon says, hey, just pick up your computer or your tablet, order the product and get it. We want it. That's it. Simple as that. And that's what they do. So culture has some very different views, but I wanted to show you this as people that I thought doing a good job. Communication. Here are two of my favorite topics, train companies in the UK. Now, I travel quite a bit, and I travel quite a lot on Virgin. I have the misfortune to live in Southern Rail territory. And what happens here is that I believe that the biggest obstacle to communication is the fear of litigation, meaning that if I tell you something, if I'm a working company, working for one of these companies, and I tell you something and it doesn't quite turn out to be the way it was, then you're going to sue me, which I can see where that comes from the US mostly. But if you look at these two companies, Virgin, I travel on Virgin quite frequently. I go up to the Midlands. And if my train is delayed, I know, I get communication. If there's something going on, they let me know. And they let me know almost instantly via text or via my app. And if the train is delayed and there's, as you know, they have this delay repay system, what happens is Virgin do it automatically. They communicate to me, yep, it's been paid. We've paid it back. If it's on Southern, and there are so many things wrong with Southern, I can't even begin here, but on Southern, you have to take your ticket, you have to scan your ticket, you have to then send them a form with a copy of this. I mean, it's crazy that you have to do that. So from a communication perspective, they're delivering all the wrong messages, and perhaps they won't be doing this for much longer. But this communication aspect of it, we hear many times when you see people interviewed when there's been a delay for the flight delays, whether that's snow, whether that's the BA meltdown, the biggest thing you hear from the people they interview is they didn't let us know what was going on. And that's what makes people crazy. And it's not something you can't fix. Commitment. Here's our friend LL Bean, who may be more well known in the US for a great catalog program that they have, all geared to outdoor sportsmen, fishermen, and so on. LL Bean started the company in 1912. This is what he said in 1912. Sell good merchandise at a reasonable profit. Treat your customers like human beings, and they'll always come back for more. These guys are still in business, being very successful in the US and Canada and other parts of the world. 106 years later, they haven't moved from that commitment that LL Bean gave them. Another one, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Again, these are guys that have been doing this for a little while, not as long as LL Bean. But their commitment and the senior executives' commitment is this: ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And by that they mean the people that work in those organizations, and many of them are definitely from a lower socioeconomic scale, but they are treated and are expected to be treated with the same respect, with the same courtesy that the guests are treated with. And that's a commitment that is given by the senior executives, and it's a commitment that the people in the organization recognize. When I talk about community, here's a couple of examples, and these are fairly similar in some ways. Autoglass, we know. HomeServe, I think you'll know. And Autoglass, I wrote a story about them a little while ago. And the nub of the story was that a lady was stranded by the side of the M1 in a horrible rainstorm, and one of their technicians stopped and fixed a flat tire. And of course, that was all very nice, but the point I made was, well, what about the person that's waiting for that technician to fix their windscreen. Well, the deal was that when this happens, that technician has full empowerment to do whatever they need to do, and they do it. And somebody backs them up and goes and fixes the windscreen for whom that guy was going out. So it doesn't get dropped. It doesn't get thrown away. Somebody actually does it. HomeServe are really good at making sure that when they do a repair or whatever it is that happens, they're very observant of what's going on in the home. And many, many times they've provided additional services without any cost or alerted the authorities to a vulnerable customer. Their sense of community in this sense and in other ways is amazing. And that's the kind of thing that you need to do to change people's minds and hearts about how you treat the business. So these are just some examples of these that I wanted to leave you with, because what you want to be able to do is to create this winning culture. So creating a winning culture means that this customer experience isn't a zero-sum game. You may recognize this as Brighton Hove Albion. I happen to live close to Brighton, and for those of you that are football fans, I think you know they've done a fabulous job at creating this kind of culture. Helping customers win is a fundamental founding principle for memorable customer experiences. So when you're designing it, you design it, say, how do we make sure that customers win? And it doesn't mean getting everything you want. It doesn't mean that you say yes to everything. Quite often, it's how you say no. But it does mean resolving issues or finding solutions where all parties gain more than they lose. And then lastly, understanding where your customer sits on the emotional spectrum is vital for success. I talked about that emotional spectrum. This will change. A great example, I told some bad news stories. There was a really fabulous story told in the mail about a customer from Three, the mobile carrier, who somebody called in. His wife was ill. Had run out of time. He was on a pay-as-you-go. He'd run out of time. There was no way to get any more minutes. They just gave him an extra couple hundred minutes and said, do whatever you need to do. And that was someone recognizing this customer's emotional spectrum was at the wrong end. Right. They were in bad shape, and they really helped them out. So you really need to do that and get people to do that. This is Strother Martin from the movie Cool Hand Luke. He often came out and said, what we have here is a failure to communicate. You don't want to have a failure to communicate. Communicate early and often. The point I made earlier about trains and planes, they don't. So the bad news early is a good thing, frankly. Correct. Focus on authenticity and honesty. Make sure that your people are able to deliver that message. Make sure they have the information available. Somebody talked earlier about one of the problems about where you don't necessarily have the information available. Make sure that's available, and you can give the people as much as you can. There may be some things you don't want to tell people, but really you want to give them as much as you can get. Seek consistency and the completeness across channels. Mike mentioned this earlier. The ability to be clear, even if you have to send an SMS or if you've got it online, it doesn't matter. That consistency needs to be there regardless of how people interact with you. And really understand the emotions that your customers are feeling. Again, at that moment in time, if you know that person is in a tough place, you need to be able to adapt to that. You really need to build that into your CX design to do that. I talk about commitment, not just involvement. If you know the difference between commitment and involvement, this is a bacon and egg sandwich. In a bacon and egg sandwich, the the chicken is involved, the pig is committed. So that's the difference between involvement. You've got to lead from the front. Everyone's got to have a role to play. We hear about, you've got to have senior level commitment. You absolutely do. And if you don't have it, you will struggle. But at the same time, everyone has a role to play. It's not just the people at the top. They need to be leading, but everyone's got to be involved in that. You must involve as many people. I'm not saying absolutely everybody, but you can't leave people out. And clearly articulate. If you can really get this message across to customers and colleagues, again, I'm sure you're going to say, yeah, Jared, we know all this, but it doesn't happen. It really doesn't. Many people just don't know where they sit. And community, again, this is the Amex Stadium in Brighton, and they've done a fabulous job. You have been there. They do a wonderful job in welcoming people, welcoming away fans. And community resides in ideas. They've got some things to do that they do down there very differently from many other teams. So you can't force these things to happen. These things have to happen automatically. Bring together the different parts of an organization to agree common goals and ways of achieving them. Again, it's bringing these people in from different parts the term walking a mile in my shoes really comes through here. And then community within a business should be an extension of how we interact within our personal communities. What I said earlier, how you run your personal life should extend. You should be able to do that. I realize it's not always possible, but you really should do that. So let me leave you with a few takeaways. We talked about the 4 principles, using them to underpin and shape a successful customer experience design that forges strong, flexible, trusting relationships. You will find that this works. Eliminate dumb, meaningless, and restrictive rules by getting and acting on constant feedback from customers and colleagues. Hearing, as I said earlier, if people are saying things to you, the things that you saw in some of the headlines, you've got to act on those things. Empower and reward your people to make customer-winning decisions and to be able to take the long view in terms of the relationship. This isn't just a transactional thing. It might be for some businesses, but you really want to build that relationship. And lastly, create and document an understanding of lifetime value. What does it mean that provides a clear, measurable mutual benefit for customers and the company? Because, as I said earlier, when a customer wins, nobody loses. And nobody said that winning in business and delivering a great customer experience would be easy. But when you interact with customers, it should be stimulating, uplifting, enjoyable, and ultimately successful for all parties. After all, if they weren't there, what would you do? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry, for that. Some great information. I know that Mike and I especially like your bacon and egg sandwich analogy. And you know, as you mentioned, home serve as well. We've actually we did a site visit last year to go and see them, and heard a lot of really positive stories. So I know that Charlie will probably share that link in the chat room. So before we head over to your top tips, which have been coming in thick and fast, we want to ask a quick poll of what do you think are the most important elements influencing customer experience design? So let me share that poll with you now. Ooh. There we go. And the options are social changes and attitudes, customer feedback, employee feedback, technology capabilities, and marketing strategy. Jerry, I don't know what you're hoping to see on the back of this poll.
Well, I mean, clearly, from what I've just said, I'd like to see social change in attitudes. But I think that, you know, I talked about customer feedback and so on. And I think when I look at those things, if you get this stuff right, if you get it all right, then technology, enabling technology, which I know Mike will talk about, is very critical. I'm not one that, you know, I have to declare here, as a former Genesis person, I think, you know, what organizations like that do are great. And it's absolutely vital that if you get the strategy right, having the right technology to make it work is absolutely key. So I think they're all important. But I would like to see the social attitudes be up there, certainly.
So we had 126 people vote on the poll. So 78% say customer feedback. We got 51% say social changes and attitudes. 47% say employee feedback and technology capabilities, and 14% say marketing strategies. Mike, was that something that you were expecting to see?
Well, I'm pleased to see the score, Rachel. I think what I would say is, you know, what we've learned really from Jerry's session is now what do we do with that customer feedback? We've heard their opinions, we've heard their views. We need to take those opinions and views to more than just the contact center leadership. It needs to be the leadership of the business, the entire business, and we need to, you know, consider this feedback and act on that feedback. So, you know, delighted to see that that's right up there and the absolute most important. I agree, but now do something with that information and actually do something meaningful. That's what I'd sort of challenge the audience.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
so
don't ask if you can't act.
Correct.
Got lots of things coming through in the chat room, so we'll try and get through lots of them. So Pat replied to the question we asked at the beginning: what things have you tried to improve the customer experience? And she said, we've tried managing staff to increase numbers at peak call times and trying to promote different call times, not necessarily Monday morning. Jason, we've had a tip in from, who said, for outstanding CX, allow your colleagues who are engaging with customers to be open and honest at all times, free to explore options that will help the customer, and at the same time enjoying the feeling of helping customers, which, Jerry, I think is what you were saying with people like HomeServe.
Bang on. I think the whole thing, and again, something I've mentioned in the past, is letting people be themselves. Let their personality shine through. We all want to help people. There's nobody out there. None of the people that work in contact centers are, deliberately go out of their way not to. And if you let them, the benefits are huge, as Jason says, both from the customer and the benefits that the advisor gets are enormous.
Thank you very much for that, Jerry. We've had Mike's come in with a tip saying, we've started our Own the Customer Experience campaign through the organisation, challenging everyone from top down in both internal and external engagements to focus on their communication, the situation, and taking ownership of the resolution process. Mike, I can hear you in the background saying how you're agreeing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. We were on a team, and everybody in the organisation is part of that team. And what's nice to see, if you like, is that the contact centre is now part of that team. And I think often in the past it was kind of just something over there to do with customer service that was kind of just neglected, whereas it's got to be where the decisions happen. And that's this is a good example of that. So thank you, Mike.
Pat's just told me that he's actually a he, so apologies, Pat, for my assumption. So let's just come to say, share the tip saying, to reduce escalated calls, we empowered agents to make gestures of goodwill to any value. We also produced guidelines with example scenarios. Call lengths reduced, customers, staff and managers were all happier, which I think is a great one. We've spoken a lot about kind of empowering agents. So Christina said, we've initiated a customer first campaign to allow any employee to voice their concerns with broken processes and allows them to offer suggestions to improve the customer experience. We also utilize a voice analytics software to identify our problem areas with customer interactions. Jerry, I know you were saying earlier about broken processes was a big thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping Christine's from HomeServe, because that's I think customer first is a word, or it's a phrase that's used quite often, but that's the name of their program, where they do just that, where anyone in the front line, whether that be a contact center agent or a technician, can submit a concern. It gets treated the next day, so it doesn't sit around for a while. Next morning it gets treated by a team and they address the issue. And it's a great way of, that's the way you demonstrate that you care about people. Yeah.
So Charlotte sent in an opinion saying metrics should be based on what will satisfy the customer rather than what suits the company. Customers will stay loyal to a company that cares, which I agree with. So Colleen sent in a tip saying, when coaching, allow the agents to redesign the call that will result in a better client experience. This will empower them by directing their thinking more toward consistently creating better client experiences. The agents are the golden tool to delivering better client experiences after all, which, Jerry, I know is something that you've said about.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Give them a role. This is what I'm saying about the community side of it and the commitment side. If they're not engaged, they will feel that they're being put upon. But if they feel they've had a role in designing the solution, they'll absolutely be committed to it.
Yeah, they're invested.
Yeah. So we've got one opinion saying, I really believe what Richard Branson always says. If you treat your staff well, your customers will automatically be treated correctly. Happy people creates happy experiences, especially if they are empowered and recognized by senior management. And that was sent in by Nelly. So thanks very much for that. We'll come back to your questions in a bit, but delighted to pass the baton over to Mike Murphy from Genesis to take us through his presentation and how Genesis and CX is involved.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks everybody. Great content there, Jerry. Thank you for that. Really, I think timely and interesting. And I think it's important for the audience to if you like, absorb that. Because I think, like you, I've been working in this space for quite a time, and some of the things that we're seeing are they've been around a while, and surely we can do better than some of the examples that we're seeing. And we have seen this before, so let's not kind of tread over old footpaths or footprints rather. So in my couple of slides, really, what I wanted to kind of talk about was, imagine that team in the boardroom who are deciding about, getting the customer experience right. And in that team, there are going to be some of the people who kind of operate and run the contact center. And what's really important about that is because the contact center is where you're going to get most of the feedback that boardroom needs to allow them to make the right decisions, okay? Because most of the customer touch is going to be happening with the people who are on that boardroom table representing the contact center. We have the feedback, we have the statistics, we have the analysis, we have the data that will allow them to truly understand whether things are good or things are bad. So from that perspective, don't underestimate the role here. It's a critical role, and you have to have a solid stake, if you like, in that boardroom decision making. So please be clear about that. From the Genesis perspective, really what we're looking to do is kind of provide the technology that would kind of underpin that contact center platform. And based upon some acquisitions, etc., over the years, Genesis has a very nice, capable, and broad portfolio that can help customers from the very small startup, new business, or niche player, right the way up to the very, very large global player. And we have customers across that entire spectrum, from the very, very large to the very, very small. And I'm pleased to say, based upon some feedback we learned last week, that we're getting good NPS scores from our customers, and that's pleasing to see. But as always, we can do better, and we strive to do that. I think what's important to understand as well that cloud is a very key part of our future around technology. Consumers want it more accessible, and to that end, however you want to consume the software, we're sort of pleased to be able to sort of say that we have that offering for our customers. But if we take it down a level sort of below, if you will, and kind of just understand the things that we're looking to deliver to our customers, and straight away we start talking about the design comment, because customer experience doesn't happen by accident, it happens by design. And this is really where design starts to kick in, because if we look at the first bubble, we kind of talk about being able to design exceptional relationships with all of your customers. And thinking about that really we will go into it in a bit more detail, but when we talk about all of our customers, you will have some high-value customers and you'll have some not so high-value customers, but you must be able to treat them all with a great experience. And to that end, we would believe at Genesis that we have got some good tools to help you there. Some might be self-service orientated, and I would think looking forward into the next couple of years, I would say expect to see a lot more from automation and self-service. But certainly we've got to be able to empower the brand with the right tools to be able to deliver great, consistent experiences. The second bubble you see really is all about your resources. So, we saw several examples, if you like, in the commentary so far about long wait times, transfer times, customer hold times. I mean, these are all examples where we're not getting the balance of our human resources correct with the sort of incoming traffic. So, as an executive who's responsible for the contact center, I kind of feel, as Mike Murphy, I kind of need to know I should be able to anticipate today what I'm going to be seeing coming through my door. Whether I'm a global player, whether I'm a local player, I need to have a gut feeling every morning as to what I'm going to be expecting work-wise today. And do I feel in my mind that I've got the right team ready with the right skills and the right place to be able to handle that? And it's more about workforce management. It's also about capability. It's also about maybe helping my people develop. It's kind of nurturing my team to make them stronger. So again, tools around that is very, very important. But remember the boardroom table sort of comment that I said earlier, where you need to be able to kind of provide the statistics. So the third bubble really is the element that delivers that. That's where you have the facts, if you like, that you can take to the boardroom and kind of say, our customer experience is X. Our sort of abandons are Y. We missed this many opportunities. We secured this many opportunities. Our customer feedback is X. So the kind of tools to give you that correct insight to be able to argue at the boardroom table to say, actually, if we do this, then we're going to suffer a consequence. If we do that, we will actually achieve better customer satisfaction. And to give you those statistics, to give you those insights, to give you that factual data, that's really the third bubble of on the slide here. So regardless of whether you're a large customer or a small customer, our sort of strategy is to give you those tools consistently across those platforms. And then just to kind of put the real context to it, going down one more level really it's all about on the customer engagement side where I'm designing, it's digital. So any digital, inbound, outbound, chats, emails, calls, the self-service of some of those, the automation of some of those, interacting with websites, social, SMS, all of those kind of interactions are in that bubble, you would say, and we call it customer engagement. When we're looking at your people coaching and your people development, then we're really looking at employee engagement. So how they're collaborating together as a team, how they're collaborating together as a team player and a supervisor or a coach, how they're collaborating together as a customer and supplier relationship, maybe a customer and customer and supplier relationship. How does that particular work in collaboration? So giving the sort of the teams the tools necessary to be skilled and sort of like ready for the work they're expecting today, and give those teams the feeling that I'm actually on a trajectory here, that I'm going to be a more valuable agent over time. I've got a career, I'm going to be developed, I'm going to be coached on new skills, and not that notion that I'm kind of stuck in this sort of dead-end contact center role and not really have the kind of aspirations that actually as an individual I feel I have. So to that end, that again kind of folds into that sort of teamwork, team effect, and ultimately better experience. And the last sort of equation, the last bubble, the business optimization, and that's where I talk about being able to understand my workload today, anticipating the number of web hits I'm going to get, anticipating the number of web chats I'm going to get, the number of times a customer would like to co-browse with me and them to maybe help me buy something or choose something or complete an insurance claim, or those type of interactions. Maybe some analytics around that, maybe some details around my capacity. Have I got the right sort of capability in my networks? Those are the kind of answers that we kind of need to make sure as we go to the boardroom, we're confident that we have the facts and necessary capability in place to meet our customers' needs. And so with that kind of sort of like strategy, if you will, within the sort of Genesis portfolio, I just wanted to give you an example of how that sort of articulates itself into one of the particular platforms, and one that's been very sort of it's growing very, very briskly at the moment. That's our Pure Cloud platform. But really, it kind of helps the customers, if you like, by engaging that technology, deliver experiences that you don't want to miss. And what's really kind of cool about that is if we look at the sort of the agent experience and how it's designed, and if you look at the sort of the graphic there, you can kind of see it's quite simple. It's kind of clear. It's not kind of a messy, congested screen. But on that same screen, you can see that I'm handling Facebook interactions, tweet interactions. I'm handling chats. I'm handling calls. I'm handling emails. And it's very consistent. It's very simple for me as an agent to kind of learn one platform, and that actually does multiple things. Instead of having to wrestle with my email tool, flip over and change to my call handling tool, flip over and change to my chat tool, and somehow deliver a great experience for everybody in a single shift. And that's where we really see, if you like, the agent experience getting eroded, because they just kind of lose the will, because not only am I wrestling with my channels, then I've got to go and find the answers. And that might be multiple sort of customer information systems. So we really got to think about making that sort of environment for your agent team simple interfaces, omni-channel sort of inherently, have those sort of integrations that gives the answers already done, and preferably providing the answers by prompt, and helping those agents to be, if you like, the expert or the CEO for this conversation is often how we like to set that bar. And then as we kind of work up the chain, we sort of look at the supervisors who are supporting the agents. Really, they again need to have that unified interface, being able to know that they can record calls, obviously, but recording chats, SMSs, emails, being able to sort of record the co-browse to make sure that as we kind of observe how Mike is behaving in those interactions, is he meeting the standards and expectations that we have as a brand? And being able to quality score across all those different channels is really, really important. So again, we know quite a lot of this from our call handling experience, but we haven't been seeing the examples of that being adopted across the multi-channel, and that's where I think we're sort of failing. And I kind of mentioned earlier about the notion that sadly I've seen where customers have sort of brought in sort of different channels to try and deflect, if you like, the work, but deflecting doesn't really sort of score the goal. It just often misses, because ultimately all I'm doing is repeating the load I have on my call queue somewhere else in the organization. Maybe it's not in my budget, so what do I care? But that's really a very poor and tactical sort of approach, really. We're kind of all in a team together. So whether I do only work with voice and somebody else works with chat or email or digital, for example, don't we all work in the same team that's sitting in the boardroom together? Yes, we do. So kind of we need to get it kind of over those sort of like interdepartmental sort of colloquialisms, and sort of like we've got to get a bit more strategic, because guess what? That's where our customer thinks. And in the same way, I need to have a real-time visibility. What is my sort of call queue, chat queue, email queue? How is my outbound campaign going? One single interface, providing that statistical information is very, very easy. So in this sense, this isn't, if you like, a dream world. This is reality. This is a very accessible, flexible, fast to deploy capability. Look at the administration. We really love to empower our customers to make the changes themselves. From that perspective, and that's really what customers love about this type of technology. They can adapt, they can change, they can learn, they can. They're the pilot, really. That's how we describe it. They're kind of delivering the service to the customer, and if they want to bring in a new product, if they want to enhance the product, they can make those changes absolutely immediately on the fly, and that's very, very empowering, especially as you're trying to listen to your customers and actually demonstrate, yes, I've heard what you said, Mr. Customer, and I'm going to make a change in my strategy, in my call flows, in my email flows, and you're actually going to feel that the next time you touch. And think about that customer who made that comment, when they feel that difference the next time. That's really empowering. They really see, then they become invested in you as a brand because you've listened to them. And I think, again, something which was cautionary for me earlier was, I'm hearing a lot about how we can capture this and capture that, but actually, what are we doing with the captured data? We take it to the boardroom. Are we actually doing that? We'll make sure you are. And when you get to the boardroom, what are we doing with the data to make sure the next time we ask for data from our customers, we're able to show them a difference? Yeah, we heard your captured information. Thank you for that. And oh, by the way, we listened and we made a significant change. They're the kind of elements I'd like to see more activity on, really. So regardless of whether it's agent skills, roles, permissions, adding users, taking out users, for us, if you like, that's all empowered by the user. Why should we be involved as a technology vendor in that particular role? We shouldn't. We should be giving you the tools to be able to allow you to kind of steer the ship. And then the last one really is, think about the customer in that scenario. What they should be enjoying is that frictionless experience. I really, really love that phrase. It's a frictionless experience for your customer, no matter which way I kind of choose to connect. And again, that's really, really important. If you want to provide that consistency, a single platform that's kind of capturing all of these different ways that a customer can touch your brand into one, if you like, logical, one sort of measurement, one sort of visibility point, then you can start to sort of like really deliver great experiences for your customer. And absolutely, please, do not repeat your request for information. And if you do, that's immediately a sign of failure. It's a bit like that notion of, I need to transfer. It's a sign of failure. They should be red flags for any sort of contact center leader to say, how can I eliminate this from my operation? And by the way, I need to do that urgently, because you're really starting to sort of drop yourself down the sort of rankings by just having customers in those sort of scenarios. Get to the root of why do you need to transfer, problem area? Why don't we need to wait, problem area? Okay, so just as a sort of an example, that's kind of how we sort of saw things on Pure Cloud. The choice is simple, we say, but ultimately, the effects are tremendous. What I would caution is that, we've been working a lot recently as a sort of a community in the contact center area. We've been very much working with voice and email and chat and social, and that's been pretty cool. But what I would say is, if you like, in 24 months time, forgive me, sorry, in 24 months time, our world is going to be very, very different. And this kind of slide, I think, will just sort of give you some ideas as to how things might look. And one thing that I see which is quite effective at the moment is this idea of like asynchronous messaging and sort of keeping your customer posted on how things are progressing with their transaction. A very, very powerful sort of tool. We've seen some success with that in SMS, and again, we can kind of build on that more. But look at the idea of like video is a normal part of customer experience. Industry verticals are reinventing themselves because they kind of have to stay alive. If we look at the sort of financial services industry, it's becoming very challenged by the sort of like the fintech sort of like startups that are sort of like popping up all over the city, because they see an opportunity where what is the role of this kind of financial middleman, this financial expert? Do I really trust this guy with my sort of serious investments that I got to decide upon in the next 10 years? So again, these kind of traditional sort of like very stable industries are being very, very much sort of challenged, and expect change in the future. AI will certainly emerge, and we have seen examples of that. Interestingly, we haven't really seen how it's been cracked yet. And Genesis have our view as a technology provider. So we have this notion where we kind of consider like blended AI to be the answer, where it's part automation but part human. And from that perspective, that's kind of our approach. Love to talk to you about it if you have an opportunity to connect. My details are on later. But I suppose what I'm saying is that if we think you're kind of struggling at the moment, then maybe like you have a technology issue. So maybe you should address that, because believe me, in the next 24 months, we're going to have different issues. And if a technology platform can't support that today, what we're working with today, the calls, chats, and emails and social today, well, is that same platform going to be able to work with this? I would argue not. So from that perspective, I think get back into that boardroom, argue for sort of like technology change so that you're ready and you can be able to empower your customers as you kind of go forward into this new, brave, changing world. So with that, Rachel, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Some very interesting platform that you've kind of taken a whistle-stop tour. I know we've got the opportunity for people to ask for a demo later, but we'll get into that. We've got so much coming through on the chat room. But first I want to ask a quick poll, which is, does it cost more or less to give a good customer experience? I think it would be interesting to find out what people are thinking on that. Jerry, I don't know what your thoughts are on that one.
I don't want to question your question, but
okay.
I think I would say that the way of looking at it is that, can you afford not to give a good customer experience? Because I think what you'll see is not whether it costs more, costs the same, or costs less. What you'll see is, because the benefits are so broad, it'll be in increased revenue. It'll certainly be increased engagement. All of the signals, all of the signs will point to it being a very positive and profitable way of doing it. So and I think this is kind of what I was relating to earlier. Some of the challenges are because somebody in the boardroom says, how much is that going to cost us? Oh, we can't afford that. So where do they go?
Right.
Yeah, and the results would tend to agree with you. 41% saying it costs less, 26% saying about the same, then 16% it costs more, and 12% it costs a lot less, 5% it costs a lot more. So yeah, I think the audience would tend to agree with you, Jerry.
And I think I just wanted to comment on one of Mike's things that he said that I think is very, very important and sometimes gets lost. He was talking about the fact that quite often organizational people think that jobs in contact centers are dead-end jobs, or it's something they're doing between acting gigs. And I think what he pointed out, and it's very valid, is that as you improve the capabilities, as you bring more of these really great technology advancements, it makes the role more interesting. It gives them more people to look forward to, and you've got a much better chance of keeping the people. And if in respect to this last question, that's why it costs you less. You've got more people staying, doing a great job, wanting to be there, more engaged. The benefits are huge.
Correct.
Thank you for that. So Charlotte sent in a question saying, if you cannot give the customer what they want, how do you give them a memorable customer experience? Jerry, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one.
Sure. I work with a company in Canada that was very involved in the not so much the airline business per se, but rewards. And one of the things that would happen is, if you've ever tried to get a reward from an airline or someone like that, quite often you find there are blackout periods. You can't go when you want. What they began to do was that rather than, if the customer said, I want to fly or do it on this date, they'd say, no, sorry, that date's not available. And of course, right away, the customer experience goes down. What they would start to do if they looked and saw it wasn't available, they would ask them a question. Oh, have you been to Vancouver before? Is this the first time? Are you going on business? And what they would be trying to do is to move the date to perhaps to a date when it was available. And so they could say, well, actually, I've got a date. You could travel on the 1st of February. Well, that doesn't sound bad. All of a sudden, they're turning a potentially bad situation into a good one. Everyone won't have those opportunities, but that's the way to do it.
So we're going to quickly shoot through a few more tips. So Christine said, to ensure that our agents are properly handling customer interactions, we utilize a mystery shopper program where a caller will call a particular line and grade the call based on their company's set criteria.
Very good. Very good.
Mike has,
effective.
yeah, I like that one. So Mike said, we've started an internal audit, including all levels, senior management down to the frontline agents, of policies, processes and procedures that create pain points and may affect the agent's ability to really provide the experience and resolution that their customer wants and needs. And I think probably a last tip, sadly we can't get through all of them, Chloe said, empathy is your best friend. Take responsibility for the call, use I instead of we, and show that you're actively listening and that you truly do care about your callers. So we also want to show that we care. We'd love to know in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? So share that in the chat room. And today's winning tip has come in from Ches, who says, 2 years ago, we started reporting on why customers were calling. 6 months ago, we gave these reasons business owners. The top 3 reasons for calling should be gone by June this year. This equates to around 50% of the current workload. So we'll be in touch after the webinar.
Well done, Ches.
So yes, thank you. And we do have our own survey, so it's only 4 questions long. So please leave, when you leave the webinar, please fill in our post-webinar survey. It also does give you a chance to, if you'd like to see a demonstration of the Genesis software, please just fill in the box in the survey. Just time for me to say that there is a replay. This will be sent to you later on today. And I just want to say thank you to our 2 speakers. To Jerry Brown, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rachel.
And to Mike Murphy from Genesis, thank you also for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.
And goodbye from me. I'll be back in a week's time. So see you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.